Welcome to Front Office Pros. Today, we're going to be talking about our top 10 Dynasty rookie quarterback rankings with tiers. With us today is a special guest making his first appearance with Front Office Pros, which is none other than Scott Soltis. Scott works as a contributor with the IDP Show. Scott, thanks so much for joining the show today.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me. Really excited to be here.
Hike!
All right, guys. Joe, why don't you start us off in Tier 5? Who do you got?
All right, in Tier 5, and at number 10, I've got quarterback Joe Milton, and at number 9, I've got Michael Pratt.
Yeah, so I've got a couple of similar names there, except I've got one more in my Tier 5. So I've got Joe Milton at 10. I've got Jordan Travis at 9, and then Michael Pratt at 8 as my fifth tier of kind of long shot-ish guys, but guys that are at least worth a sniff.
All right, and then for me, I've got number 10, Jordan Travis, and number 9, Joe Milton. So we're all pretty similar here. I think of us all, we all had Joe Milton in there. He's a guy for me that I wanted to put higher. Joe, you know I want to put him higher because he's got just that bazooka of an arm. The guy is super athletic. You would think he's like, I don't know, I feel like he's like the Jamarcus Russell of old, but the thing is that the guy, they're just avoiding that now. Which, I mean, Jamarcus Russell was a bust, so you would think that then Joe Milton's going to be a bust, which is what you think, Joe.
That is correct.
But you can't deny his raw talent, though, right? I mean, that's why we would have him within this top 10. I think that he's a guy that, if I'm an NFL team, I want to kick the tires on this guy. He's got potential.
Yeah, but the problem is the word potential is a scary one, Steve, and that's when GMs, can lose jobs. But, this guy is not going to, it's going to be a late round pick, so nobody's going to lose their job over it. But yeah, I mean, he does got the raw talent, but really the only thing he does have is that bazooka of an arm. And, he still hasn't found that touch. And I'm challenge him to his ability to have those reads to the middle part of the fields. So, and being anything other than just that one trick pony with the deep ball.
Yeah, and I think the one thing that might separate him from Jamarcus is I haven't seen him just bomb it from one knee. So I think once he starts doing that, then the alarm bells should go off. But to me, he's got a little bit of upside for fantasy perspective. I always like a little bit of that juice in terms of field mobility. And PFF had him at a 7 out of 10 in terms of field mobility, which is a pretty good score. So I think that's a little bit of upside if he can get on the field because he has the talent. I was just looking at, the Beast by Dane Brugler, and he mentioned that he has first-round talent, but he's in all of our bottom tier, and he's not very high up on NFL draft boards either because he's just so raw. So if he works out, fantastic, but, he's a guy that you'd take a flyer on really late in a fantasy draft.
Now, Scott, you also had Jordan Travis in there. I did as well. I'm a little surprised this guy isn't being talked about more. I mean, he was leading the Florida State Seminoles on to probably the college football playoff before, he had that season-ending injury. Do you think Travis is a guy who's somewhat intriguing?
I do. I think the injury is a big part of what's holding him down on some boards. I also think, we know that college production doesn't always translate to NFL production. And I've seen some takes about, he's a great college quarterback and how much that skill set will or won't translate to the pros. I think a lot about like Hendon Hooker last year, who, had a lot of potential coming out of Tennessee, but then had that unfortunate injury and the timing of it where he never got to really see the field. And now he's an afterthought. And I think people might have a little bit of, not that people were taking Hooker very high in drafts, but even if you were spending a fourth round pick, you might have some buyer's remorse there. And I think that might be pushing Travis down a little bit. But from a potential standpoint, he's got an 8 in terms of field mobility. So he's even more mobile, assuming he gets back to his full health. A lot of talent, has played well against really good competition. So I think there's a lot of good things there because he's a mobile guy and he's shown he can do it.
Joe, did you not have Jordan Travis in your top 10, or are we not saying him yet for you?
No, I've got him in a higher tier, Steve.
Oh, okay. So we'll wait. We'll wait to see
on Jordan Travis than you guys. That I think you're definitely right. If it wasn't for him tearing his ACL, he would have been getting brought up higher, especially if, let's face it, if he doesn't tear his ACL, Florida State's playing in the college football playoff, and he's going to get the exposure and get the chance to play on the national stage as well, which would have risen his draft stock too. But he didn't get that opportunity. So,
and you guys both had Michael Pratt in there. What was your guys' thoughts with him?
Yeah, I think Michael Pratt is a interesting quarterback, small school guy, but I think with him, obviously he doesn't have the athleticism that these other quarterbacks that we've talked about have, but I think he's got the mental and the processing part, which he could be an intriguing option, as far as NFL teams look at it that way.
Yeah, and for me, a lot of this positioning is what the market's saying. So, I don't really I'm not a big tape guy because I think everyone's tape can look great, and I'll think everyone is the next big thing if I just watch their best plays. But what I do like to do is to see what everyone is saying, what scouts are saying, what beat writers are saying, and look at really those consensus kind of big boards. And, he's still in my bottom tier. He's in my 8th overall position because there's a pretty significant jump from him to the next guy. But, he's definitely the highest of the bunch. He's got some talent, not a very mobile guy, which also hurts him from a fantasy perspective for me. And granted, that's not a prerequisite for fantasy success in any kind of way. But, as I'm deciding between similarly tiered guys, that's something I'll look for to push someone up or maybe pull someone back a little bit. And his 5 in the field mobility index is definitely on the lower side of the crop that were discussed this year. Not the lowest. We'll get there in a little bit, but I think that there are some things to like if he gets in the right situation where he could have some success, but I feel like the path is kind of tricky for him.
So guys, let's head over to our tier 4. Joe, who do you got there?
Yeah, tier 4. Number 8, I've got Jordan Travis, and then number 7, I've got Spencer Rattler.
Nice. Now, for me, tier 4 is the Spencer Rattler tier. There's very clearly a tier break above and below him for me. So I've got Spencer Rattler in my number 7 spot in my 4th tier.
Interesting, Scott. I almost thought to do the same thing, but I've got 8 as Michael Pratt and then 7 as Spencer Rattler. My reasoning behind Michael Pratt is, I gotta tell you, I have to say I apologize to Michael Pratt because I overlooked him. I remember someone even asked us, "What did you think about Michael Pratt?" I was like, I honestly didn't really look all that much into him, so I couldn't really tell you. But when I watched him, and what I understand about him, he's just got a great long ball. I am not, and we're going to be talking about some guys here in the future. This is going to be create kind of a rift between Joe and I. But we've got some catch and checkdowns around these parts and these quarterback prospects. And Michael Pratt is not that. I think the big thing with him is, what I understand, is he's not the best processor. He's not going to be able to look at multiple reads, which is going to limit his upside, I think, in the NFL. But he's a guy I'd love to see him go to somewhere like the Jets. Learn behind a guy like Aaron Rodgers. Take a year under your belt, and then next year maybe you get a shot. So I think he's interesting. As far as Rattler goes, what are your guys' thoughts there? I like you, Scott. I almost just had Rattler in this tier. What are your guys' thoughts on Rattler?
Yeah, so for me, it was a pretty clear tier break, mostly due to that consensus evaluation. So when I look at Michael Pratt, he is the consensus 136th best player in the entire class. Rattler is 80. So, that's a pretty healthy jump in terms of what the market is saying about him. And, all it takes is one team, but it also is likely to translate a little bit into his draft capital. And draft capital is, with backup quarterbacks, not as important as a lot of other positions until you get started near the top where you're guaranteed to have at least some opportunities. But I don't know, Rattler, not the most mobile guy, but again, the things that I have seen and what the market's telling me about him tells me that, he's a guy that has a fighting chance.
Yeah, I think, Rattler's just an interesting player, and I'm curious to see how these NFL teams, evaluate him. He was once like a leading candidate to be a Heisman winner, and then he's kind of just fallen down. But, he did have a good showing at the Senior Bowl, obviously, was the MVP of the Senior Bowl. So he's put some good stuff out there recently. So he's a guy, I think 7 is the appropriate spot for him, in conjunction with the other top 6 quarterbacks. But, I'm curious to see where he lands and ultimately, what success he may have.
I think he's a tough evaluation because that South Carolina Gamecocks team was pretty bad. But I will say and I'm with you, Scott, when you watch the tape, you can look at anything and dust it off and make it look nice. But one thing I think that did shine through was his ability to face pressure. He was able to complete passes even in the face of pressure, which you can't say that for some guys. I know, Joe, your biggest knock we're going to talk about him is Michael Penix, a guy who you saw him face the pressure that he had with Michigan and he folded. So, I mean, Rattler might not have every trait that a quarterback has, but, when there's pressure in the pocket, he is able to still complete the pass. So let's go over to tier 3, unless, Joe, you have anything else to add about Jordan Travis.
Nope, I kind of did my spiel there, and I think Travis is an interesting quarterback. I'm curious to see what he can do. What I liked about him at Florida State was just his willingness to take those shots down the field, even though his guy might be covered. Just throw a jump ball to his guys. I mean, obviously he had pretty tall guys in Florida State, so that's just. But he gave him a shot and threw the jump passes to him.
All right, Joe, head over to tier 3. Who do you got?
Yeah, so tier 3 at number 6, I've got Michael Penix, and then at 5, I've got Bo Nix.
Yep, I've got the same guys just flipped, but it is razor thin for me. So I've got Bo Nix at 6 and Michael Penix Jr. at 5th.
All right, so for me, this is a standalone tier. At number 6, I got Bo Nix. But I got a bone to pick with Joe. How could you possibly have Bo Nix ahead of Michael Penix? I need to hear your defense on this.
Why?
I think that's horrible.
I don't know why you think that's terrible, Steve. I mean, I told you my concern with Michael Penix. He faced one NFL caliber defense all year in the national championship.
It's one game.
Hey, it was an actual NFL defense. Michigan's as close as you can get to an NFL defense, and he couldn't do the reads. He couldn't handle the pressure in the pocket, and his eyes kept coming down to the rush, and he was getting hit a lot. I don't know. I'm nervous about Michael Penix, and I think he's got to go to the perfect spot. He doesn't have that mobility that these other quarterbacks have. Even Bo Nix, say what you want about him, but he's even got some athleticism and some mobility to him that he can kind of avoid. And I know you're going to say, Steve, he's that check down guy that you were alluding to earlier.
He's 100% a check down guy.
Well, I get that. But you know what that's also called? Taking wins. And sometimes you have to do that in the NFL. And it's just to navigate the field with the short throws. Dinking and dunking's fine. You're just all about, because, you're a Bills fan. You're used to Josh Allen. You're used to just all those home run balls that even he gets in trouble with. And you just like the long passes. And that's why we see differently here. And guess what Michael Penix is elite at? Throwing it down the field.
Yes. But, Joe, here's the thing. We're talking about Dynasty Fantasy Football. What's Bo Nix going to give you? He's Captain Checkdown. I just don't understand how – I mean, he would have, in my view, talk about a landing spot. In my view, unless he goes to the Denver Broncos, I think he might be sunk.
I don't think he'll be sunk because I think he's still got – everyone's saying the dream landing spot is my team, the Denver Broncos, with Sean Payton and his comparison to Drew Brees and everything, down to his height and hand size and everything else. But I think regardless where he goes, he's played a ton of college football. I know Penix has as well. And he's always, once he was at Oregon, they really brought the best out of him. And, I get the dinking and dunking thing, Steve, but that's just, I can appreciate that as, spending 2 years with Russell Wilson, who just wouldn't take those easy throws and was looking to push it down the field, and it just doesn't work.
All right, Scott, break the tie for us. You already have Penix ahead of Nick, so I'm going to like what you have to say.
Yeah, I feel like I need to be the mediator here to smooth things over between you guys. I had Penix just a little bit ahead of Nix, and when I say a little bit, the consensus overall on the big boards for them, 31 versus 32. I mean, the market sees them as largely interchangeable from a real-life NFL talent perspective. From a fantasy perspective, though, I do tend to lean towards Penix a little bit more. Nix is more mobile. And again, this is a great place where the tape can lie to you so much because as a Penn State fan, I have Michael Penix just reaching that arm out and getting that 2-point conversion that beat us when he played for Indiana 2 years ago, thinking he is the most athletic quarterback since Michael Vick in my brain. And then I read PFF and they see him as a 3 out of 10 in terms of field mobility. So I know he doesn't have that, but the thing that he does have, and this is a direct quote from the Michael Brugler's, Dane Brugler's The Beast, arm confidence and willingness to attack every square inch of the field. Sign me up for that in fantasy. Now, I get there are some leagues that reward things like completion percentage. And if you're in a league like that, I could see you flipping these and having Knicks higher because, taking yards is a good thing. And if you get rewarded for that, that's fine. But, Penix has that huge upside. Steve, let me ask you something. Would you like Penix as Josh Allen's backup?
Interesting. I like that you posed a question to me, Scott. I feel like most of our guests don't pose questions to me, so this is new. I don't know. We have so many holes. I don't think I'd want to have. I'd want to use their draft capital elsewhere, but I would not be upset if Penix was the backup.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. I forgot that he's on some boards, a high second round pick, and I wouldn't think, but just from a central casting perspective, what are the similarities that you see there? Or, differences from Allen in terms of just that gunslinger mentality and how you can see that translating?
Well, I have my thoughts on Penix, which I'm going to elect the hold because
I forgot he's another tier for you.
I'll dive in because I like Penix, but with Knicks, he's just a vanilla guy to me. I don't understand how the guy played. I believe he played the most
last year. Just
boy, but there's the difference.
He turned out.
That's fair, but the difference between the two, I literally did say that too. But this is even more. But this is even more vanilla, and it too. This guy. He'd be great for Sean Payton because Sean Payton loves screens, and that's what he'll do screens all day long with Sean Payton's offense. I just think that he does have the mobility, which helps him. I will give him the credit that he has the ability to throw outside the pocket. But I just think that his game is very limited, and that's why I have him here. So why don't we go to tier 2, or else I'm going to keep going with this. So, Joe, who do you got?
Yeah, at tier 2, number 4, I've got J.J. McCarthy, and at 3, I've got Drake May.
Okay, I can respect that. This is another tier that is a tier in and unto itself for me, and this is the J.J. McCarthy tier. I've got J.J. McCarthy as my 4th quarterback, and he is in tier 2 all by himself.
All right, Joe, buckle up. Number 5, I've got quarterback J.J. McCarthy, and number 4, I've got quarterback Michael Penix. Here's my thing with McCarthy. He's the 2.0 version. He's the more improved version, I'll say, for Bo Nix. I could see why you want McCarthy more than Bo Nix. McCarthy is a great processor. I think he's more athletic, and he's got higher potential because he didn't have to throw. The offense was run through Corum and that running game. So there's some games he threw 10 passing attempts. So, there's that projection of what he could be. But I feel like you would have to agree with this because you've watched all the Michigan games. J.J. McCarthy is not a good thrower of the deep ball.
I disagree with that. He can throw the deep ball just fine. They just didn't throw a lot of deep balls, but I think that's completely in his arsenal.
No, he barely showed it. I disagree with you. It's night and day between him and Penix. It's not even close.
Well, okay, right. But Penix also had a lot better wide receiver talent than Michigan did. Roman Wilson's a slot guy. He wasn't exactly our deep guy. Cornelius Johnson on the outside, he's okay. He had his moments, but he's not like a burner and a speedster down the field. So, a lot of times the deeper passes were to Colston Loveland out of the tight end position.
but here's the thing: you're telling me that J.J. McCarthy,
but you're just coming at it from the deep balls. All that matters. I don't care about the deep ball. Yes, J.J. McCarthy can hit the deep ball if he has to, but not everything's all about the deep ball. Patrick Mahomes even had to learn that because the Vic Fangio style of defense, that shell would take those away, and these quarterbacks have to learn to just take what the defense is giving you and navigate down the field on the longer style of drives.
But you're telling me that JJ McCarthy's inaccuracy that he showed in college is not concerning. I mean, there were times where he just
accurate. I mean, he has accuracy. I don't know where you're getting the inaccuracy parts.
yeah, there are times where he just blatantly missed people.
I don't know about that.
What do you think, Scott? Break the tie.
What I'm hearing him say is that Patrick Mahomes missed people too, and he turned out all right. So no, I think that JJ has, he has that football IQ that is going to help him out. I don't think he has the livest arm in the group, but again, you don't have to have the livest arm, the great accuracy on the deep ball. You need to be able to throw it deep. I think a little bit more than we've seen him do so thus far in his career. It doesn't mean it's not in his bag. It could very well have been more a function of the system or the talent that's there currently. But I still think he's going to get the draft capital that's going to get him playing time on an NFL roster sooner rather than later. Pretty much every mock draft has him going in the top 10 through a trade. So he's going to get a chance to play early. He's going to get a chance to play often. If he gets put in a high-powered offense, I don't care if he can't throw the deep ball. If he's throwing to Justin Jefferson, then sign me up, because I think he can definitely accomplish a lot there. So, to me, from a fantasy perspective, he's not as exciting as the rest of the guys that are in my top tier, but I think that he is one of those good, safe picks if you want to, like me, trade back in a lot of your drafts and get the less attractive quarterback who can still end up being a really functional starter for you, especially in super flex leagues. That's what JJ McCarthy is to me.
Yeah, I mean, I think JJ McCarthy's got a lot of potential. There's no doubt about that. I mean, to me, he's a projection, because we only saw a glimpse of what he was in Michigan and what will he look like. So I think I'll feel better about him if he gets under an offensive mastermind. I think that would be very beneficial for him. As far as Penix goes, I would say he is a pure pocket passer. There's no doubt about that. I do think his 40-yard dash time did raise some eyebrows, because I didn't think people thought he was as quick as he was. But he does have, I think there is a concern of how he does under pressure. So I'm not saying he's a perfect prospect by any means. I just think that there are some aspects of his game I personally find very enticing.
Yeah,
so let's
throw it down the field. I know.
So let's head over to tier 1, Joe. Who do you got?
All right.
Oh, wait a minute. You had Drake May in this tier. Did you not?
Yeah, he's in my tier 2. Yeah, I couldn't put him up there with the top 2 guys.
Wow. And the reasoning for that is?
Early on I had him higher in the tier 1 because I thought like he brought more mobility, similar to Josh Allen. But the more that I'm hearing about him is that his like mobility and athleticism is maybe closer to a Justin Herbert than it is Josh Allen. So I felt like I had to bring him down a little bit, because a lot of what I liked out of him was the potential rushing upside, and like a Josh Allen who not only passes for a lot of touchdowns, but also can get you those rushing touchdowns. And depending on the type of league you play in and the scoring, those rushing touchdowns can be like a cheat code.
All right. So who do you have in tier 1 then?
Yeah. So tier 1 at number 2, I've got Caleb Williams. And like I've had, Steve, Jaden Daniels is my number 1 guy.
All right. Well, I hope I get invited back then after saying this, because I've got Daniels at 3. I've got Drake May at 2, and I've got Caleb Williams as my number 1 overall, all in this first tier. And to be perfectly clear, landing spot can shuffle these pretty significantly for me. So, even though I have Daniels significantly lower than you, I could see some movement, and there's, you're not going to get a big fight out of me and any of these guys pre-draft.
Scott, I can assure you there's nothing that's been said today that's going to make you not be able to be eligible to come back. You certainly will be someone on our short list to come back. But my tier 1, so this will be a fun debate, guys. Number 3, I've got Jaden Daniels. So I'm with you, Scott. Number 2, I got a shakeup. I got Caleb Williams. And number 1, I've got Drake May. So those
yes.
Joe, here's the thing. When I see him, I see Josh Allen. So to me, and look at what Josh Allen's been. Josh Allen's been like the number one quarterback for the past 3-4 years in fantasy. Why would you not want that?
Because that's my problem. I'm hearing that he's like, me and you both like Joe Klatt a lot, and watching his
we
show,
do.
he was just saying he doesn't see the Josh Allen comparisons, and he's seeing more of a Justin Herbert comp out of him in terms of his running style. Like, he's got the ability to run, but he's not that big bulldozing guy gamer that Josh Allen is, where he's hurdling guys, stiff arming them, and he doesn't also. Like Drake May, they said he's just an effective runner. He runs when he has to, and he'll kind of, go up and just kind of get what he can and get out of bounds.
See, but I don't think about him for his running ability. I personally, his biggest knock is his accuracy, which was Allen's too.
And you want to talk about J.J. McCarthy not being accurate. This guy's your number one, and he's potentially the most inaccurate quarterback in the
I understand, but this is a ceiling play, and he has got, in my view, possibly the highest ceiling. That's why I have him here, because he's got a rocket of an arm. I mean, the guy can throw anywhere. You said it. I think you get a trend from being with us for the first time where Joe and I differ when it comes to quarterbacks.
It's all about the exciting plays, the big plays down the field, but that's not how, the NFL is not all about the boom plays, Steve, and the exciting plays.
Well, are you surprised I don't have Caleb as number one anymore?
Yeah, I was very surprised because, you've been very consistent with Caleb Williams being your number one, but I know I can get some flack for Jaden Daniels number one, but Drake May, I haven't seen anyone really putting him in number one.
Oh boy, here we go.
Yeah, that does feel a little bold to me too. Again, I think that history might look back favorably on you depending on where they land, and especially the talent that's going to be around them and the coaching that's going to be around them in the first couple of years. And we've seen more than one first-round quarterback really do well in their first few years, and more than one first-round quarterback be traded shortly into their tenure with their team. So I think there's an argument to be made for the upside of these guys. I see the upside of Daniels and Williams a little bit more clearly. The comp that I have been seeing a lot for May is Justin Herbert, and I would be thrilled to have Justin Herbert on my fantasy teams. Don't get me wrong. But to me, when it comes to this idea of who is most likely to really boom, it's Williams or Daniels, even though I know I had May just ahead of Daniels. But if I was thinking about it from a ceiling standpoint, it would probably be Williams, Daniels, May for me. But because I look at ceiling and floor, that's how I ended up landing on Williams, May, and Daniels, because I see Williams as having a huge ceiling and a high floor. I see May as having a high floor. I don't see the ceiling quite as high as the other guys. And I see Daniels having a little bit lower of a floor, but a really high ceiling. So to me, Williams is the only one who kind of checks both of those boxes for me right now. But you can twist my arm in either directions depending on your risk tolerance and if you're in super flex, what your other quarterback looks like.
Well, it's really interesting because there really is a stark difference in my view between Jaden Daniels, how he plays, and Caleb Williams. So with Caleb, I think the thing that I always thought was alluring was his different arm angles, throwing off platform, that's kind of Mahomes-esque, right? So I could see why, in my view, I got enamored by it because I was like, oh, well, look what he's able to do. But I do think something that could get him in trouble is he's honestly, and that's why I obviously like him and you don't, Joe, is he's basically the opposite of these check down guys. He's always looking for the big play, and he's like trying to like move around and kind of wiggle his way around the backfield to get a spot where he's going to throw, and it's going to be this crazy throw. I think that he could get himself, I think he might almost do that too much, and I think it could get him in trouble. I think there could be a lot of defenses that key in on it. I think he didn't have a lot of turnovers in college, but I think that if he tries to be kind of a hero ball and kind of this like magician that's trying to throw stuff all over the place, I mean, it's not like he's going to go to the Bears, right? And Bears don't have the best offensive line to begin with. So I don't know. That's the part of me that's like, I could see it going south for Caleb Williams. I could see where it could really boom. I've had him as my top guy for the longest time. I just think that whereas with Daniels, I'll say that Daniels, when things start to collapse, he'll scramble. And he's very fast. He's probably, we didn't see his 40 time, but we're looking at a similar player to Lamar Jackson, right, with his ability to evade, defenders. So you have completely different styles. You've got Caleb who's going to try to, do somersaults in the backfield to try to get the ability to throw somewhere downfield and make this magical throw, where you got Jaden Daniels who's going to scramble and maybe get a 10, 15-yard play. But when he scrambles, he scrambles. It's not like he's running to look downfield to throw. Like he commits right away. So I don't know. I could see why people like Daniels. I'm a little concerned about his frame. And
talking about the guy who wasn't concerned about that with Bryce Young at all last year.
Okay, but I get that. You're not wrong. Okay, but I don't think that was his frame was the problem, and he doesn't run. Bryce Young is not a guy who scrambles and is running for 1,000 yards. Jay Daniels is going to get contact all the time. Bryce Young, if he gets popped in the pocket, then sure. But Bryce Young's not going to be taking as many rushing attempts in an NFL game.
Very true, but you still get hit in the pocket.
Especially
Especially when your offensive line is still as bad as the Panthers.
Yeah. Yeah. I know we're talking about incoming rookies. I still have a lot of hope for Bryce Young. He was my QB1 last year. I think
Thank you, Scott. Thank you.
Did him so dirty with that offensive line and not giving him anything other than Adam Thielen to throw to. I mean, talk about setting someone up for failure. But I still think there's a lot of talent there. So, I get a little defensive when I hear some besmirching of Bryce Young.
Thank you, Scott. We appreciate it. Even more reason for you to come back next time around and deal with Joe over there. He's like a dog with a bone, ready to come after me when it comes to Bryce Young. But I will agree with you that I think we all agree on this point, is that I think landing spot is really going to make a big, big determination here. Like for me, if Drake May goes to the Giants, I'm going to be thrilled because I saw what Dable was able to do with Josh Allen. If Drake May goes to the Patriots, he's taken a big nosedive. So even though I think he's super talented, in my view, he's the type of guy I want to make sure he gets the right fit. Jaden Daniels probably is going to be the Commanders, right? We know that's probably inevitable. We know that Caleb Williams is sort of inevitable going to the Bears if everything checks out the way we think it will. So those guys I'm not as concerned about, but May, there's going to be a big question mark as to where he goes.
Definitely. Yeah, I mean, part of the reason I like Jaden Daniels, I just think his rushing ability gives him that high ceiling. But, if he goes to the Commanders, he gets to have Cliff Kingsbury there. And, we saw what he was able to do with, someone like Kyler Murray and make him pretty fantasy relevant. So
do you feel any certain way that he played with Brian Thomas and Malik Neighbors? Like, what's it going to look like? I mean, Drake May, who did he have to work with? Devontae Walker, who was pretty inconsistent. I mean, could you say that around him was not as good?
I mean, in 2022, May had pretty good weapons around him, and that hence he played a lot better, and his numbers were a lot better than this past year. But you can make the cases for the high-end talent. I mean, your beloved Michael Penix had a similar thing. He had the best offensive line in football, and he had elite weapons on the outside. And I'm not hearing him taking hits for that. I mean, Jaden Daniels can only throw to who he's got on the field. Sure, it helps to have guys like that, but I think. No matter where he goes, I mean, he's still got NFL wide receivers to throw the ball to, and that's going to be better. That's the thing with the NFL. It's a collection of the best college players, not just these college teams that have college players in college football.
So again, I know I'm the guest, but I'd love to pose something to the two of you just to hear your thoughts.
Yes.
I know we all had J.J. McCarthy a little bit lower, but now that we're talking about landing spots, could you see McCarthy jumping any of these other guys if he gets in the right spot? And, if May goes to the Patriots and McCarthy goes to the Vikings, does that shake up enough how much you see things, or are you guys pretty locked into who's in what tier? in
No,
terms of the top 4.
That's a great question, Scott. And for me, yes, I would put McCarthy ahead of May in that standpoint, which I know could be stark because of how I described McCarthy and how I described May.
You got Drake May at the number 1 spot.
I get that, but May going to the Patriots, I think is like he's going to Siberia. Like I think that would be horrendous. Any quarterback that goes there, I just don't like what's going to happen there. So for me, you got McCarthy with Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, T.J. Hawkinson. Look, I may not think that he has certain components, but I'm a big believer in landing spot. I think landing spot. There's a lot. But I even go as far as I think there are some players that had they gone to a different team, they would have actually had been like solid pros in the league. But because they went to a really bad team, they were phased out now of the NFL in 4 years.
Well, yeah, I mean that's the premise of the landing spots. That if these guys were to go to different places, they'd be a lot better.
But some guys get a second chance and end up their talent prevails and they end up doing something with themselves in the NFL. I just think that there are some players that you would, if they would have gotten the right chance, they probably would have been a good player, and they just never did.
Yeah, definitely.
Would it change things for you, Joe?
Oh yeah, I mean, like J.J. McCarthy for sure would jump Drake May in that scenario, very easily.
Scott, answering your own question, would you do the same? Would you follow the same logic?
Yeah, I mean, I've got them as 1, 2, 4, and 7 in that overall consensus. And then when I do some fantasy adjustments, they're pretty much in that same range. So I think Caleb Williams is pretty locked in for me as the one because I'm already kind of baking the landing spot in, and the fact that they have a lot of draft capital, and I'm assuming they're going to invest some of that on defensive end and then offensive tackle. I don't know the order they're going to do that, but those are going to be 2 of the things that I'm sure they're going to address. And those are 2 deeper positions for the first couple of rounds, at least this year. So, I'm a believer in the talent around Williams and that the Bears can finally get good. So I think he's pretty locked in for me as my 1, but 2, 3, and 4 are absolutely fluid. I'm agreeing with you that Daniels is very likely to end up in Washington, and I think that'd be a good spot for him. That would probably bump him up to 2 for me, and then it really comes to May and McCarthy of who ends up where. And if one of these other guys, you look at some mocks now and you see a Nix or you see a Penix sneaking into the first round and getting that even late first round draft capital. Some wild mocks I've seen have middle of the first round draft capital with some trades, and you put the guy in the right spot and suddenly they become a whole lot more relevant.
So that does it for our top 10 Dynasty rookie quarterback rankings with tiers. Scott, thanks so much for joining the show today. Where can others find your great work?
Yeah, so I am a contributor for the IDP Show, so you can find a lot of my work there. I do IDP content, as you might imagine, but I also do combined offense and IDP rookie rankings. So I've been doing those for several years now. So if you want to see what those look like, and if you want to see my successes and failures from past years, I go through all my positions, and there's lots of information out there on where I thrive and where I can improve and how I'm working to improve all that. So you can find my work there, and I'm on Twitter as Professor IDP because I'm a HR professor in real life, and I love using data and analytics to understand performance management in the workplace. So why not do it in a fun setting like football as well?
And I will say, Scott, you won't say this, but I will. Scott is underfollowed big time in my view. Wow, how he does not have over 1,000 followers is beyond me. So go ahead and follow him over at Twitter. It was a pleasure having you, Scott. We look forward to having you again next time. And going forward, we're going to be talking about our top 10 rankings for running back rookies, wide receiver rookies, and IDP. You're not going to want to miss that. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time.